On today's show, Media Day has come and gone. There was a lot said by guys in the Cavs. We're going to talk about championship expectations, Evan Mobley's evolution, some injury updates, and so much more on this Media Day reaction special edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham, and you might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. And I just want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first, or maybe in this case, second listen of the day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure to drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, as we get started here, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Media Day in Cleveland has come and gone, and training camp is upon us. I'm recording this Monday afternoon after I got home from Rocket Arena for Media Day, and there was a lot said. And the place I want to start today's show is with championship expectations, because everybody who is watching or listening to this show is well aware that last year the Cavs won 64 games, and then they lost in the second round against the Indiana Pacers in what can only best be described as a failure in the postseason. And I do think that this offseason, and even at the end of last season, that the Cavs did a good job of recognizing that, of looking and say, hey, we were not good enough. We did not do good enough. And yes, injuries played certainly a factor in that. We will talk about the injuries, specifically Darius, Garland, and Max Strus, coming up in just a little bit today. But they've all recognized that that wasn't good enough, and that there are real expectations on this team, I think, in a way that there haven't been before. Last year, the Cavs came into things having a new coach, having Donovan Mitchell recently extended. Evan Mobley, you thought he was going to be really good and take that leap, but we hadn't actually seen it. Like, we didn't have the proof of concept there. We didn't know what things were going to look like with Kenny Atkinson. We didn't know if Darius Garland was going to bounce back and return to all-star form the way he did. Like, there were some legitimate unknowns about the Cavs last year. And that's why their win total on FanDuel, I believe, was 48.5. And if you listen to this show, you know I was pounding the table to take the over on that one. But when guys would bring up a championship 12 months ago, it was like, yeah, you know, if maybe this, and this goes well, like, could that happen? I guess. Like, it was a real fuzzy look as to what the season could be. You had to, I think, be among the most optimistic about the Cavs last year to think that they were going to be a championship contending team. Nobody anticipated that they were going to win 64 games. I know I certainly didn't. Like, I thought they were definitely going to win 50 plus, but I didn't see 64 games in the card. I did not see them being a team that should have been deeper in the postseason than it was. Like, I thought last year that, you know, they should be a team that can compete to get to the conference finals, but the pathway there might be difficult. And they went out and they started 15-0, and they had a 16-game winning streak during the season as well. And they finished with the best record in the East, and they led the East wire to wire last year. There was not a day after they had played basketball where they didn't have the best record in the East all year long. And that, to me, was a surprise. I think that was a surprise to a lot of people, both internally and externally. Nobody expected a 15-0 start. And nobody expected externally the Cavs to be a championship contender last season. This year, those expectations are there. Like, the Cavs are expected to be the team, or them or New York, the two teams that are competing to win the Eastern Conference and go to the finals at the end of the day. So naturally, this is a thing that gets asked about quite a bit with Media Day and what your expectations are, especially when you are a team like the Cavs that came up short last year. And I do think it's fair to say, after Media Day, after listening to what some of these guys had to say, the championship is the primary goal for the team. And it's a different way than it was last year, because at every Media Day, I mean, I bet you could go to a dozen Media Days that happened today, and guys are talking about winning a championship. Obviously, it's more realistic in some places than others. And in Cleveland, it is very realistic. And I thought it was really important that Evan Mobley talked about this. Like, he was asked about goals for this season, and he just flat out said a championship. Like, that was the first thing that came out of his mouth. He said, biggest goal is a championship. We're ready for that. And I do believe the Cavs are ready for that. Whether or not they actually go out and win the championship, I have no idea if that's going to happen. June is a long ways from now. But I do think it's important for them, especially the best players, to vocalize that. Because this is a team that they're going to go as far as Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley, to a very similar extent, can take them. So to hear Evan Mobley speak about winning a championship this year as somebody who is expected to maybe not blossom into the guy, but like 1B on a championship level team, which is, I think, a realistic possibility for him. But hearing him talk about that being the team goal, and, you know, he does have individual goals, like he wants to make the All-Star team again, which I do think he will do. And he has some other ones that he didn't want to necessarily share, but I think that getting more MVP votes is certainly part of what should be his goal, and making another All-NBA team, and like so on and so forth. But the championship was the first thing he spoke about. And I think that's a very important thing. And guys don't necessarily always want to label it like that. Like Larry Nance Jr. was asked, is this championship or bust? And he said, I don't think so. I do think that's a tough spot for him, because while he's not a new guy, so to speak, like he's been on the Cavs before, he has immense history with this organization. Like, he's new to this specific roster. And I think him being a new guy coming in and say, yeah, championship or bust, probably not the place for him. Like, I can understand him answering it that way. But in the same breath, Max Strus was asked, if this season can be considered a success if the Cavs are not playing in June. And he said that he does not think it could be a success if the Cavs are not playing in June. And playing in June and winning the championship are two different things. I do think if the Cavs are in the finals, unless they just get absolutely smoked, like, it would be really difficult for me to sit here and say, yeah, Cavs lost in the finals, this season was a failure. Like, that would just probably not sit right with me. And I don't think it should sit right anywhere. It doesn't mean you have to be thrilled they lost, but I also think that some nuance is required, because only one team wins the title every single year. The Cavs are, I think, unquestionably good enough to do it. So the fact that they're talking this way, I do think is a positive thing, because I look at this and say, one, the Cavs know what is expected of them, right? And they're not stupid. They've heard the noise all offseason. They know they came up short, and they know that they're a team that is good enough to do this. But I also think it does exude a level of confidence that they need to have. And it's one thing to speak about winning a championship when you're considered a long shot, the way that the Cavs were last year. But the Cavs have the second best championship odds in all of basketball. The only team that FanDuel believes has a better chance of winning the title this upcoming season is Oklahoma City. And yes, there is a sizable gap between Oklahoma City and the Cavs at number 2, but I do think that this is the time for the Cavs. And being as confident as they are and speaking about what a success would constitute this year, I think is an important thing. I think it's a good thing that they're talking like this. I think it's a good thing to have these expectations. Now, with some of those expectations does come a little bit of, I think, extra pressure. Now, that is going to be the thing that the roster is not going to necessarily lean into. Like, I asked Evan Mobley about that, and he said he doesn't think there's additional pressure. But I do think it's one thing to say that in September, as it is right now. And it's another thing when you are in maybe the conference finals in late May. So we'll see about that when it comes. But I do think that this season is going to be looked at through such a postseason lens. Now, if not that the regular season doesn't matter, and I don't think that the Cavs think the regular season doesn't matter. I think that maybe they're not going to live and die with every single result. Like Larry Nance Jr., because he was on the last Cavs team that went to the final, he brought up something that I thought was interesting about that group. And he was only here in Cleveland on that team for the second half of the season. He was acquired on the day of the trade deadline. So it's not as if he has the experience of the full season. But one of the things he talked about was that was a team that didn't necessarily harp on a Tuesday night in Chicago or a Thursday night against Brooklyn. And he didn't mean it in an offending way to either one of those organizations. It was more so of that was a team that had the bigger picture in mind. And I would expect this team's probably going to care a little bit more about the regular season than that team did. That was the last LeBron team. That team went 50-32 after getting off to what I believe was a very good start to the season. Like that might have been the second best start to a Cavs season behind what happened this past season with the Cavs. But they underachieved in the regular season because they had a bigger picture in mind. I would be very, very surprised if the Cavs underachieved to that extent. Like that Cavs team was fourth in the East. I don't see that happening this year, but I do think that this is going to be a team that has a bigger picture in mind. The other thing that I wanted to add in this first segment is there was a lot of talk about mental toughness. You know, DeAndre Hunter had some things to say about it, saying that he didn't think that team was mentally tough enough when the moment came. Donovan Mitchell talked about needing, as a group, needing to be able to mentally push through. And he talked like a guy that has a lot of confidence in this team. And I think that is certainly a good sign. And there were some really interesting things from Thomas Bryant, too. And as you know, Bryant is the newest member of the Cavs. He was signed last week to a deal. And Bryant was on the Pacers team last year that beat the Cavs in the postseason. And he was able to speak about that experience and how close that team was and how confident they were. And he thought that the Cavs are in a spot where they needed to mentally go through something like that. And we can say that they needed to do it, and maybe they did. And DeAndre Hunter talked about that a little bit too. That the way you grow is by going through those trials and tribulations, if you will. And maybe that was it for the Cavs. Maybe that is the one that finally pushes them over the edge to being a mentally tough team that can handle all of the rigors of the postseason. Time will tell as far as that goes, but I do think that the Cavs right now are in the proper headspace. That is takeaway number one coming out of media day. Now, there are some actual basketball things that I want to talk about because I do think that we've got a relatively firm answer on what the starting lineup is going to be. And there was a lot of talk about where Evan Mobley's game is going next, and I will talk about that next right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss because right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. On Tuesday, the American League Wild Card Series getting started. Your Cleveland Guardians going to be sending Gavin Williams to the mound against the Detroit Tigers. Tarek Skubal on the bump for the Tigers. Guardians are an underdog in this game. Plus 138. Now, I understand why they're an underdog because Tarek Skubal has been, I think, for the past 2 years, it is very fair to call him the best pitcher in the American League. Now, being that this is a game between two divisional opponents, and the fact that the Guardians saw Tarek Skubal 4 times this season, and they also saw him twice in the postseason last year in the ALDS, including a Game 5 win, the Guardians do actually have a lot of experience against Tarek Skubal. Does that mean they're going to win? I would like to think so. I don't know that I feel like, yes, it's a lock they're going to win. But at plus 138 on the money line, I like the Guardians there. I think that's very good value. You can get that on FanDuel. And if you make that your first $5 bet, one, if that bet hits, you're going to get a little bit more back because that plus 138 on the money line, but also you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com. There's FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure to drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. And of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. Evan Mobley was a guy that I was very interested to see in person for the first time since the Cavs season ended in May of this past spring, I guess. And one, he did look a little bit bigger. I don't know that it was as noticeable a difference in his upper body as to what I thought from 2 years ago to last media day. But I do think that Evan Mobley put on a little bit of weight. I think he got a little bit bigger, and I do think that he will be stronger. Again, he did talk about adding some strength. He didn't necessarily want to talk about how much bigger he is, but I do think that he's going to be a stronger player this year. I think that'll be a really good thing for the Cavs. Now, the one thing that came out sort of unsolicited from a couple of other guys about Evan was his ball handling. And if you are an everydayer to this show and you listen to Locked On Cavs every day, you know I have talked about how important I think that is, about how I think Evan Mobley becoming a better ball handler will be a very important thing for the Cavs offense. It will help to unlock a lot of things. It will make the Cavs even more efficient because it will give them another playmaker on the floor. It will give them another guy that can create efficiently, not only for himself, but for others. I think that would be a big boost to the Cavs offense. Well, Lonzo Ball was asked about Evan and just kind of what stood out to him being at some of these offseason workouts. And he right away said how comfortable he is handling the basketball. Like that is a thing that he was surprised by. And, it's tough because Lonzo really hasn't played against Evan very much because he's only played 70 games in the entire time Evan Mobley has been in the NBA. So he's not the best example because you look at it, even if it's a guy like Thomas Bryant, who has played against Evan Mobley a bunch, Lonzo has, or Larry Nance, who's played against Evan Mobley quite a bit. Lonzo hasn't. But to see him come in from the outside and be like, whoa, that is something that stood out to me, I think is a really good sign for where this Cavs offense is going. Donovan Mitchell also mentioned it, and Evan talked about it too, because at the start of the season, Lonzo Ball also, he did mention too, I want to slip this in just because it ties into Evan Mobley. Lonzo was asked about playing back-to-backs, which he did not do with the Bulls last year. He said that the Cavs and himself have not talked about like a firm plan for this year, but he does not anticipate playing back-to-backs early in the season. And he also thinks that, maybe there's a chance by the end of the year he is playing back-to-backs. But I would be very surprised if Lonzo Ball plays back-to-backs for the Cavs this year. I think that will be part of the plan. And that does just kind of get into the whole Evan Mobley as a ball handler thing. Because if Evan is comfortable doing this and being on the basketball more frequently, it eases the burden of not having Lonzo Ball for a night. And with Darius Garland likely being out to start the season, we're going to talk about that coming up in a second too. Evan Mobley is going to be counted on more to do these things. And I think that this was a necessary step for Evan to take, whether or not Lonzo Ball had never had an injury before in his past, whether or not Darius Garland was coming into this season 100% completely healthy. I think for Evan to maximize who he can be as a player, this was the most logical and I think most important step forward that he could take going into this season. So I think that the fact that guys like Lonzo Ball and Donovan Mitchell are bringing this up, and even Kenny Atkinson, Kobe Altman last week talking about this, I think that this is one of the best signs for the Cavs this offseason, because Evan is a guy that has a ceiling of being a top 5 player in basketball. But unless he does this one specific thing well, he's not going to reach that ceiling. So I think it's a great sign that it was brought up, especially unprompted by somebody like Lonzo Ball, who I do think a lot of guys respect as far as an offensive player, and even more so as a defensive player. But as a floor general, and even if you want to lean into the defensive side of things with Lonzo too, the fact that he looks at that and say, yeah, that guy's good at it while being a good defensive player, I think is a really, really good sign. We did get some starting lineup news that I think is worth talking about right now too. So DeAndre Hunter is, I think we have kind of danced around calling him like the presumed starter at the small forward spot. And I think it's fair to say like we can start putting DeAndre Hunter in pen into the starting lineup at the beginning of the year. And I would guess for the entire season, barring any sort of injury. I asked him whether or not it matters to him, and he said it doesn't matter, but that is what he anticipates his role being. And he was asked if he had a conversation about Kenny Atkinson about it, and he said, yeah, Kenny asked if he wanted to start, and DeAndre Hunter told him that, yes, he does. So I think that kind of solves that maybe not so actual mystery. Like I think it was the worst kept secret that DeAndre Hunter is going to be in the starting lineup. And I just think coming out of media day, that is one of the things that feel pretty safe in assuming that now Hunter is going to be that full-time starting small forward. And I think that is going to have some positive ripple effects, because now one of the issues with the Cavs last year is, while yes, they were very talented, they were a little guard heavy. If you think about it, between Donovan and Darius and Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill and Max Strus and Isaac Okoro, like all of those guys, their natural position is a 1, which is the case of Darius and I think Ty as well. A 2, which is obviously Donovan, is Sam, and I think even is Isaac and Max. Like I look at it and say the Cavs had a lot of guys that should be the 1 or the 2 last year, which meant they had to play some of those guys at the 3. And because they had to play some of those guys at the 3, which for the most part was Max and Isaac and Sam, it meant some of the guys that they have, which this is the area they're thin, but it meant that some of the guys they have that are small forwards had to play up a position. And DeAndre Hunter had to play power forward, I think, a little bit more frequently than would have been best for the Cavs. And I look at this and say, okay, if he's starting at small forward, it might be fair to say that maybe not all of his minutes, actually, definitely not all of his minutes, but a good chunk of his minutes are going to come in his natural position. And I think that will have some pretty good cascading effects, because I also look at it and say, okay, well, Sam Merrill is not going to be asked to play out of position very frequently this year either. Like, he actually played out of position last season more frequently than he played his natural position. And I would expect that this year, that's going to be the inverse. And I think that is a really good sign. I think getting the starting lineup right is going to be something the Cavs get. I would imagine, too, that Sam Merrill is going to be the starting shooting guard at the beginning of the year, because I don't think Darius Garland is going to be available. We're going to talk about what Darius had to say, talk about his injury, and we'll talk about Max Strus' injury too next, right here on Locked on Cavs. But first, today's show brought to you by Monarch Money. Did you know that most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments? And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. They'll help you out, because it's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch built for people with busy lives. So if you've put off organizing your finances, because I know a lot of you have, it can be a burden to have to deal with, but not with Monarch. Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally, feel like you are in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. Monarch will handle all of it for you. So don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Right now, you can use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA, at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. Again, 50% off your first year. What a great deal at monarchmoney.com by using code LOCKEDONNBA. Thank you again for making Locked on Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked on Cavs content. Darius Garland, I feel comfortable saying, will not be on the floor opening night for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, I feel comfortable saying this not because of anything Darius Garland said, but because of everything that everyone else has said. Everybody that has talked about what things look like opening night, or Evan Mobley's role, it's always been with the caveat, with Darius out, right? That is something Kenny Atkinson said it. Kobe Altman said it, I believe. Donovan Mitchell said it. I believe Evan Mobley said it. I think Lonzo Ball said it. Like, it is, Larry Nance may have said it. It is, I think, a pretty open secret that Garland is not going to begin the season available to the Cavs. I will say, I don't think he's far off. I would be surprised if he's not playing within the first month of the season. By first month, I mean like Thanksgiving-ish. I'm not talking, the Cavs start October 22nd. If he's not playing by Halloween, something went wrong. I mean, maybe he does. But I just don't think he's going to miss more than a month to start the season. And he does say that he has a date in mind to return, but he didn't want to give specifics. And there have not been specifics given, and I'm not sure how firm or loose that date might be that he has. But I do look at this and say it's probably pretty fair to expect Darius Garland to be in New York in street clothes on October 22nd at Madison Square Garden to begin the season. Now, maybe it's not far off past that. I don't know. Darius did not want to share that date, so I don't have that date. But I do think that he's not going to miss a ton of time. He is doing everything on the floor. He says that, he's involved in basketball activities. He's doing a lot of stuff. I will be very interested to see what he's able to do at training camp at IMG Academy in Florida, starting on Tuesday. I think that stuff will all be very, very interesting to track and follow and just see how he's progressing. But I do think the conditioning aspect of this, making sure that he's ready to go. And the other thing with it is, you want to make sure that he's good to go. The Cavs are in a position where nobody should be rushed back from an injury. That means Darius. That certainly means Max Strus. Those guys need to be as close to 100% as they can possibly be when the postseason arrives. They don't need to be 100% October 22nd. They don't need to be 100% December 22nd. They need to be 100% April 22nd, May 22nd. That is when it matters the most for this Cavs team. So I do think taking a slow, cautious, measured approach with guys like Darius Garland and Max Strus is a very important thing and is the right course of action for the Cavs. As for Max, he did speak at Media Day. He was wearing what I thought was very interesting. He was wearing basketball shoes. He said that, he's really supposed to be in the boot still. And he's allowed out of the boot for rehab. And this was what he was calling his rehab for the day. So I still think that he's a ways off. And I talked to him a little bit. He said that he was on crutches, non-weight bearing for the first couple of weeks. And he's been in a walking boot since, I believe he's 5 weeks post-surgery at this point. So it is something that this is going to be an injury that lingers. I would be surprised if Max Strus is back before the calendar flips to 2026. Now, that doesn't say anything about Max Strus because I think that he's going to push as hard as he can to be back as soon as he can. But this is an injury that can be really tricky. This is an injury that you can have a setback if you push things too far. And because of where this bone is located that he broke, and he had a Jones fracture, which is your 5th metatarsal. And basically, if you pretend my hand is a foot, it's the outside of your pinky is where the break is. He had a surgery, had a screw put in, and it's one of those things where you have to wait for it to get better. You can do all the rehab that you want to do, but if you push it a little too far, if you go too soon, you can have an injury again. And that would obviously be the worst case scenario. So I do think that with Max, I think the Cavs are probably going to have to protect him from himself just a little bit. He's going to do everything in his power to get back as soon as he possibly can. That is the type of guy Max is. That is who I have learned him to be in my dealings with him. And I do look at this and say, hey, he'll be back on the floor when he's back on the floor. But the fact that the Cavs are a championship contender, they need him in April, May, and June. They don't need him in December. They don't need him in November. They don't need him in October. The best thing for him, I think, erring on missing more time than coming back too soon would be a very, very wise decision for the Cavs and a very, very wise decision for Max personally as well. That's going to do it for today's show. There was a lot from me today. I will be talking about several things that happened at Rocket Arena on Monday throughout the week, as well as training camp, because training camp is finally here. I'm recording this. It is 3:45 Monday afternoon. In about 4 hours, I will be on a plane heading down to Sarasota, Florida for Cavs training camp at IMG Academy. I cannot wait to bring you guys content from Cavs training camp every day the rest of this week. And as I said, if you missed the first episode of Monday, this is serving as Tuesday's show. So there will not be another episode in your feeds Tuesday morning. This is serving as it, but I wanted to get it out Monday afternoon for you guys. So I will be back on my normal schedule Wednesday morning. We'll be back first thing in the morning, 7:15 right here on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. A little bit before that, typically try and get it up there around 5 in the morning. So don't expect one tomorrow, but I will be back Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, just as normal right here on Locked on Cavs. So thank you for making this show your first listen. Thank you for making Locked on Cavs your first listen every single day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast. Please do us a favor. Make sure you are subscribed as the season gets started. And if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked on Cavs content. I'll be back tomorrow talking about Cavs training camp.